I am very conscious that we're a bit behind time and that I'm between you and the drinks which are sitting outside. So I will go through relatively quickly the things that I have to say. What I thought is, in the spirit of encouraging talent, or younger talent, that I wouldn't do this alone. So I have with me two colleagues, Rigour and Zia. Zia's going to join me on the stage. Zia, if you could just come up, and we'll divide this between us. We thought we could tweet live from this event about what's going on, but apparently there are some problems with the live tweeting, so that the tweeting is dormant rather than live. You may not know Wolff Olins, but the likelihood is that you will know the clients that we work for, because for us, the clients are the hero, not us. And so we do little to promote ourselves. We let the clients for whom we work promote us indirectly. Some of those are in India and some are not. Now, I am a brand consultant. Zia is a brand consultant. Rigour is a brand consultant. We are now delighted to be part of Omnicom, but this fellow you see here, Martin Sorrell, tried to buy Wolff Olins several times, and one of the times when we politely declined him, his language was actually much less polite than what you see on this slide, but what he said was, you guys, these brand consultants, make a lot of noise. That's where the expletive was. The fact is that all of you could fit in one small theatre. Now, I think that he's missed a point. There are 5,000 or 6,000 people at this event. We are all brand consultants. And if you go to the next one. The perspective that, if you like, I bring is that where we sit is at the intersection of the things that you all do, advertising, with management consultancy. My background's management consultancy. One is a $500 billion industry, the other's a $300 or $400 billion industry. What I'm not saying, though, is that the ad guys have got all the magic and the consultants have got all the rigour. I think the question is, how do you combine them? Now, I assume everybody knows the story of the blind men and the elephant. So one guy touches the elephant's nose, thinks it's a snake, another guy touches the elephant's leg and thinks it's a tree trunk, and so on. The point is, our experience of branding may be different from yours, but they're all probably of the same animal. It's just that we have different perspectives. Now, sometimes the disagreements, as when I was on Indian TV earlier this year talking about Kingfisher, lead to a 3-on-1 defeat if we were playing soccer, where I'm fighting off 3 other guys. More seriously, though, most of our work is with complex groups and service brands. So if what we're about to say doesn't resonate with you, think of that elephant and just console yourself that we're at the back end of the elephant, and a lot of what we're therefore talking about is stuff to do with the back end of the elephant, okay? Whereas you guys are at the front end making all the noise. Okay? Now, what I'd like to share is, and share is the key word, because I came here today to learn. And in the spirit of learning, I want to just show you some observations that we've drawn in India, but also outside, from working particularly with service businesses, about where magic, the theme of this conference, meets rigour. So let me start with the boring bit, which is rigour. I don't know if any of you saw this article that was in Marketing Week, and it picks up a recurrent theme that I've seen throughout my career, which is marketing people wishing to be more important and more influential in the boardroom. And this particular article came after a survey that was done, which suggested that CMOs wanted to learn more about business strategy and technology. But I sat in a conversation, and I'm sure we've all been in these conversations, between the CEO of a big group and his CMO, where the CEO cut the CMO short, who was presenting some work on the brand, and said, look, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in brand awareness, brand attributes, or even market share. All I want to know about is what you're going to do to help me with profit, risk, and growth. You've got a week. Now go away and come back when you have the answer. Now, that was a few years ago, and to put the comment of the CEO in context, I don't know if any of you saw this. In 1997, the Harvard Business Review was 75 years old, and they published what they said was the biggest ideas in business and management of the 20th century. So there were quality circles, there were lean production, but what there wasn't was brand. So for the Harvard Business Review and Harvard Business School behind it, and all the people that graduated from Harvard Business School before that, brand was at best ancillary to business. So when the CEO is saying to the CMO, I'm not interested in that stuff, tell me about profit, risk and growth, he's talking the language of Harvard Business School. Now Zia, who studied design at Parsons, has just come back from Harvard, so she can tell you about that. 15 years on though, it's all changed. Every year there are 3 surveys at least telling us which are the world's most valuable brands. And the only problem is that they seem to have different answers, but at least someone's trying. So in that 15 years, brand has come onto the board agenda. And we've seen the emergence of the science of branding, the science of research-based branding. Now, I don't know if any of you saw this article that McKinsey published back in 2003. And it says, marketers rely too much on intuition. But there's another little piece further on, which I've highlighted on the side, which is a jab at us all. Brand proliferation and rapid imitation have diminished the return on clever advertising and breakthrough ideas. I'm not sure I agree. But I think one of the things that does strike me is, in this article, McKinsey said that you can construct a brand positioning using statistical analysis. Our sense, in all the jobs that we've done, is that at best, research can tell you roughly, if you're creating a new brand, where the idea might lie. Is it in Africa or is it in America? It's not going to give you what McKinsey claimed. And what I see when I go to clients is a lot of dumbed down, second-hand McKinsey thinking. So here's a chart, and I'm unfair on, what are they called, the financialbrand.com, to pick them, but this chart came from McKinsey, that same article in 2003. The original was much better, but what it says is, you construct a brand around things that make you different, and things that are relevant to the market. And the ideal, as in all 2x2 matrices, is to go for the top right-hand corner, the so-called drivers. Who could disagree? And the way the chart's drawn, where it's wider than taller, by implication, differentiation is more important than relevance. And if you think, most of us are in the business of helping our client be different from the next guy. Differentiation. So we tested this, and again, this is for a service business, not a product business. We tested how important, in terms of the purchase decision, are attributes to do with relevance versus attributes to do with differentiation. And what we found was startling, that 80% of the purchase decision for this particular client came down to relevance, not differentiation. So building brands that will succeed and answer what that CEO was talking about, the first thing is understand what's important to the customer. Forget what the competition are up to. Now, that's the theoretical side. My favourite airline anywhere is Indigo, and it's not that they got a nice logo or I like the stupid wigs that the staff wear. It's that the planes fly on time. It's very small stuff. Delivery, the promise of being on time, far, far outweighs coming up with a nice theory of what the brand is by a ratio, depending on the business you're in, of 2 or 3 to 1. So it doesn't matter what we all promise, it's what the client does with it that matters. And that matters 2 or 3 times more than what we come up, by and large. But if I go back to that CEO's question, we looked at how much of the share price, in this case I used the price to book ratio, but that's a detail, is explained by the three things the CEO was talking about: profit, risk, growth. And the fact of that matter is that, and this is about correlations, those three things that the CEO talked about are at best mildly important for determining a company's share price. And that's the same in most industries, in most countries around the world. And I was talking to some financial analysts in London, and we were talking about how do you improve the rating of a company? How do you reduce the cost of capital, which is the flip side? And this fellow stopped me, one of them stopped me and said, "Don't be fooled. This stuff looks like science, but it's all about perceptions." Now, forgive me, but we're all in the business of perceptions and changing perceptions. Branding is about changing the way people behave. Why are the skills that all of you have using not directed to helping companies change their share price? I talk to investors, not just customers. We know, and I'm not trying to boast about work that we've done here, that launching a new brand can bump up a company's share price. So here we see the share price of Hero, Honda as was Motorcore going forward, relative to the Sensex. And you'll see that in August last year, when it launched, the share price blipped up, and then it came down. And if you track back, you'll see at the extreme left, when they announced that the separation from Honda. So the announcement of the separation led their share price to tumble, but by the summer it was already back to the high, and the relaunching of the brand lifted it up a bit, and it's kind of carried on. The key though is that if you look at other companies, launching a new brand has a temporary impact at best. In their case, Hero had a great advertising campaign. They had a great story about business growth and expansion internationally, and they revealed 2 new products. Who cares about the logo? No one cares. Telling a business growth story is what matters to shareholders. And in that regard, one of the finance ministers of England, the so-called Chancellor of the Exchequer, complained when sterling was kicked out of the European monetary mechanism back in the early 90s. And he called them teenage scribblers. In other words, he was saying they were children who didn't understand anything. The reality, though, is that by and large they are graduates of the best schools. Here is the brand portfolio of one of our clients a few years ago, Telenor. And the analysts, when they looked at this number of brands, assumed that the business was complicated, and therefore assumed that the business was risky, and their shares were discounted by 28% to the sum of the individual bits. 28%. That's billions of dollars. One of the small contributions that we made was to develop a simple system that made it look as though all that lot had some logic to it. The discount halved, and it put somewhere north of $1 billion on the share price. Now that's not down to us, but the point is that telling clear, simple business stories about growth to investors has a dramatic effect on share prices. The skills of all you lot can help do this. And of course, the brand, when it was launched, had all sorts of impact on performance metrics, but underneath it all, there was a very simple story. So, brand has come onto the agenda of the board. The CEO wants to talk the language of business, which is still finance, even though finance only explains about half of what's going on with the company's share price. The other half is perceptions. Big opportunity for all of us. So if that's Rigour, the boring bit, how does it work when you actually apply magic to a share price? And I'll let you.
So good evening. The reason I'm here today to talk to you about Rigour and magic with Charles is because of two things. As Charles mentioned, my education. I started by going out to study the world of magic at Parsons School of Design in New York, which is now part of the new school. And then I went on to study the world of Rigour at Harvard Business School. And I think the second reason I'm here today, at least today, is just to add a splash of pink in a sea of male speakers. So in most of our projects, creating a logo is just one of the things that we do. And I stress it's just one of the things we do. Because creating a logo for us is really not the point. As most of you know, a brand is not a logo is not a brand. Ideally, a logo should tell a story about business ambition or business strategy. As we all know, the Olympic Games are coming up in less than 100 days. This logo was created to help get the youth of London and Britain to participate more in the Games. And therefore, this design is treated as a piece of graffiti. For us, creativity is not about doing funky stuff that you just saw. It's about making useful and unexpected connections. So let me give you an example. Mercedes-Benz is one of our clients. On one hand, we found through research that there were a lot of car crashes where young kids were seriously getting injured. And on the other hand, Mercedes is a brand that stands for high quality engineering. Take the two together, overlap it, and we said to the client, couldn't you create a solution for safety? And that's how Mercedes created a solution for safety. They got into the business of creating car seats for kids, and that brand is called Kinderclass. Push the same thought further, and it can become really powerful. It can actually help clients think about their business in a different way. Let me give you another example. Last year, we were working with a cinema company, and the client was adamant that growth and brand preference was going to come by getting the best seats, the best sound, and the best screens. I don't know about you guys, but I can't remember the last time I paid attention to these three things when I went to see a movie. I'll spare you from the conversations and the debates that we had, but research quickly showed to us that going to the movie was not a 1.5-hour experience. It was actually a 5-hour outing. And this is culturally specific to the market in which I was working in. And so going out for a movie, the 5-hour outing, could be a date, it could be a family evening out, it could also be a girls' night out. But it was definitely not about seats, screens, and good sound quality. And just helping the client think about their business in this way today allows this client to operate in a completely new space where they've actually redefined the category. So if creativity is about reframing a business problem, our view is that design is a language that helps people imagine what the future might be. And it can be done in very practical ways. This is an example of sketches that I created when we were working with a bank. It was done to help the CEO understand how he could bring the brand to life for the customer through the customer journey at various touch points. But more importantly, it was not just done for the customer. What the CEO also was very interested in seeing is that what he needed to do internally for his staff to deliver that promise externally. When we do things like this, we tend to use design a lot, but design not in its complete finished form, more like a sketch. Because when it's a sketch, people think that they can come and get involved and they can take ownership of the process. If you get this right, it can be damn powerful. This is a reaction from a very, very cynical CEO. In another occasion, a CEO was in tears. But what I'm really trying to say is that design as a language can help people move brands from being hated or tolerated to being liked and perhaps being loved. But the snag is, even if you do all this emotional stuff and you get such a good reaction from the CEO, people forget a good party and they get back to their daily work. This could be a picture of a night after a good launch, or indeed Monday morning when we all get back to work and think about Goafest. Therefore, the key to make a brand a part of an employee's life is to think about the employee. Think about helping them. What is the reward going to be when they actually deliver on brand? How can we make it easy for employees to deliver on the brand? Can we embed these rules into tools so they don't really have to think about it? But the one thing that I would say is that making it easy for the employees is not about logo design documents that you see that we're all guilty of, because they actually just collect dust on a manager's desk. Now, this is one of the things we're beginning to see, where the organizational structures of some companies are changing and brand is joined up with customer experience and human resources. This structure goes way beyond the meaning of brand as logo, and I think it also goes way beyond brand living just in the corporate communications team. Now, one of our clients routinely tracks staff alignment to brand values, and you can see there's a strong correlation between the two, suggesting that for service businesses, staff experience of living the brand is reflected externally. Therefore, it is no surprise that HBS and HBR are talking and teaching this. The author, one of the authors of this book, Earl Sasser, was my professor, and the essence of what Earl said is that in order to get it right and create value for a company, you need to actually start inside out. There were tons of debate in the classroom, but in essence, on reflection, when I think about it, there are three things that came to my mind, looking at it from a brand and an India lens. One is that this process is not easy. The second, it takes a lot of time. And I think it will take a while till we see Indian companies actually taking this seriously, because we have either the chalta hai attitude or the jaldi jaldi attitude. So I think that Indian companies soon will need to invest a lot of time and a lot of money to build a real internal culture. Why do I say this? We're doing some work in Indonesia at the moment. This is a picture of a sales outlet. We see an employee sitting in front of her customer. For that customer, the employee is the brand. It's not the cool blue graphics on the wall that is the brand. Yet, all our work is aimed at the customer, not the employee. But if we come back to the customer, if we come back to the diagram I shared a little bit a while ago, with the cross, the tick, the smile, and the love, what this image actually shows is that there is very little room for brands to fit in the love category. This is some of the work actually that Sagarika did for Nisa Godrej, as she wondered what to do with the Synthol brand. The diagram helped Nisa with three things. It helped her think, what role does the Synthol brand have in this man's life? How important is Synthol? And what would it take to shift the brand from a tick to a smile, for example? Because the key is, in order to get into the hard category, we need to do simple, small, useful things. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the Heathrow Express. It's a train that runs from London Heathrow to London Paddington, and it takes 15 minutes. Now, research showed two things. The first thing, from a business customer's point of view, is that, will I get to my meeting on time? And the second thing was that, will my baggage be safe? Heathrow Express, the folks, the team, were able to solve the speed and getting the train from Heathrow to Paddington in 15 minutes. And what Olins did is that we just helped redesign the space so that customers could always see the luggage racks. So by being useful, Heathrow Express can charge 18 to 20 pounds for a 15-minute journey, and people are willing to pay it. Today's technology also has a very big impact in terms of being able to do useful, small, simple things. Technology gives us the opportunity to keep testing things. We don't need to wait for the final, finished, shiny product to come on. We can test things. We should test things. Try things, test them in beta. This is one of the projects we did for a gaming company. And we did the similar sketches as I showed before. And what the client said to us is that, all right, I'm going to test it. And within minutes, the client was able to test our ideas to see that they were relevant and useful to the customer. And this kind of experimentation, living in beta, is now beginning to spread more in traditional companies. This goes back to the point Charles made in the Rigour section of the presentation, which is that relevance trumps differentiation. So going back to our Indonesian friends, we found that they do all sorts of monitoring and brand tracking of performance, so on and so forth, relative to their competition. So our client is the blue bar, and you see they're doing a little bit better in terms of purchase experience. But if you actually look at the level of recommendation, which is the Net Promoter Score, you actually find that everyone is very low in their terms of recommendation. This implies two things. One is that everyone is focusing on differentiation. And the second thing, that this could be a real risk and a big trouble area for the category in general. The greater category risk, I think, and I would welcome some conversation around this, is when a foreign entrant enters the market. So the question we've been debating back in the studio is, what will happen to Cafe Coffee Day now that foreigners are entering the market? Will being cool, red and purple, and being trendy for young college kids still be relevant? Or India being a wildly aspirational market, kids want to hang out at Starbucks? How should foreign companies react to Indians disrupting their market? This is a picture of the Bajaj auto rickshaws in Nigeria. And what Bajaj has managed to do is turn transportation on its head. Flip it. Indians can do to Indians as well, and we're all too familiar with what Tata Docomo did with the per second billing. Now, Olins has done a recent study, an international research on high growth companies and how they've managed to change the game. I don't want to dwell on this, but if anybody's interested in this, I'll be more than happy to share it with you. Come and catch one of us later. The point is that creativity is getting businesses to think differently. This is an IBM report. Who would have ever thought that IBM would talk about creativity?
You'll be pleased to know we're almost at the end. Pulling the threads together, which is just the next one, my favourite management guru, Homer Simpson. What is this telling us? I think the first and probably obvious point, what we see, and in the next day or so I want to hear from you, because I'm here to learn, is 4 shifts which I think are going to change what we do. The first is that there's more choice in more places. When there's a little bit of choice, brand is important. When there's too much choice, I go like this. Second, we've heard a lot this afternoon about technology, so I'm not going to dwell on that. I've suggested that brand is now on the board agenda, and that some clients, at least, are beginning to break down silos and join things up. Take those 4 together and imagine that spreading a bit, and I see some quite interesting threats. Because the game, at least, that we play has been about differentiation, which means defining a positioning for a client relative to an established set of competitors, underlining that through a distinctive identity, and then telling a story through the communication techniques we all know, where all of that money is treated as a cost. We work for the client, often remotely, and an important success criteria is size or scale, having a network of offices. That's the model. And that's one of the reasons that Omnicom bought us, because they thought they could scale us up. What we're now seeing is, if the game is shifting to relevance, then the emphasis is not positioning anymore. It's what am I to you, the customer. You're the hero, not me. And in that case, the competitors are irrelevant. I want to understand your world and how I can get into that category of emotional affinity, if I ever can. It's about delivery, not promising things. And it's about then value to them, whoever they are, customers, employees, not costs. But crucially, and this is the big bit that's influencing us, it means that we have to work with clients, other firms, even their customers, not for the clients. And now what we're discovering, and it's kind of interesting because it's turned our sense of ourselves on its head. We no longer need a network of offices. What we need is a network of partners around the world in different skill areas that we can assemble each time we need to, with us more like a theatrical producer. Now, if I'm here to learn, I think we're very publicly saying we don't know where this is going. And there's an article come out in How magazine talking about how Wolff is grappling with some of these things. But I think the point that I want to leave with you before there are questions and then much more interestingly drinks is, one, to hear your views on whether this shift that we sense, at least in service businesses, feels right for you. And then if it does, we want to work with you to address it. We're complementary, not a competitor. And I think the big challenge, therefore, just wrapping this up, is how do we learn to collaborate? How many times have you been in pitches and there's a squabble as to who leads the pitch? How do we learn this new language, coincidentally, to your point? The language of business is finance still. How many of us have studied finance? For our clients, the challenge, I think, is, particularly if they're marketing people, silos, and the fact that they no longer control the brand. They, whoever they are, on the web control the brand. And for the end customer, I think the problem now is there's too much choice and frankly too much bullshit. Flip that though, and there's a fantastic opportunity staring us all right in the face, which is our skills have never been in such demand. And the opportunity is not to sell more stuff to customers, it's help clients regain influence with their investors, with their employees, as well as with their customers. The skills that you've all got are as applicable to staff and investors as they are to customers. And in many ways more so, because they aren't as jaded and cynical as customers have become. Get it right, and the prize is very big, which is more relevant more useful brands. So, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Zia. Thank you so much. And now we'd like to move on to our Q&A session. So, yeah, that's okay. So I'd like to request our moderator for this session, Mr. Ajay Kakkar, Chief Marketing Officer, Aditya Birla Financial Services, one of India's largest financial services firm, to join us on stage. Mr. Kakkar, if you could please join us. Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you've been writing down your questions, because as you know, one of the best questions, the lucky question, will get to win an iPad.
Hi to both of you, and my questions will be addressed to either or, so it's up to you. And let me start by apologizing. We are late. A few questions, but more important, questions from an Indian context. So I'm a believer, not an atheist. So starting with the basics, Charles, you in your presentation mentioned that it's all about consulting, and that's the space in which you are. So when you introduce yourself to somebody in India, what's your elevator pitch? What do you do?
Create brands.
That's a space you have a lot of competition with, everyone in this room and outside believing that they do the same. So how do you differentiate yourselves and get into the hearts of clients?
I think in the spirit of the way that we're talking, we wouldn't try to. The way we'd go at it is to show that we understand the client's problem better, if indeed we do. So we'd try and go on the relevance tack rather than differentiation. I'm not interested in who I compete with. My interest is, can I help you solve your problem? And the answer may be no, in which case, thank you. And equally, you may think I'm an idiot, in which case, that's that too. But relevance, not differentiation.
So at what stage in a brand's life or towards what end purpose do you think a client should think of you?
I think clients tend to come to us when they're thinking about if they have a new business strategy, if they're entering a new market, if their brand is not working hard enough. I think that's when clients tend to think about us in terms of when the business strategies there, or they have a pressing problem where, as Charles mentioned, the community outside does not understand the business.
So it could be as something's happened, we've separated from Honda, we're just starting a new business with Docomo, something's happened. It could be the thing we've got is tired. It could be that we want to go abroad or that foreigners are coming here. It can be any of those triggers. And one of my clients once contrasted the role of people like us to their other agencies with an analogy which I wasn't sure about at the time, but it kind of makes sense, which is the relationship, he said, with an ad agency is like a marriage. It goes on for many years and it may have its ups and downs, but ideally it's fruitful. Whereas we're more like an affair. So it happens for a few weeks or months, adds a bit of spice to life, and then you get back to life as normal. So we're there to inject what Zia called reframing the issue, help the client through the first period, and then hand it over to others, ideally the client.
Very often your output is seen as an identity or just a logo, and many advertising agencies are quick to say that they can offer that solution to their client. So do the ad agencies see you as a threat?
Ask them. I think if they see us as a threat in the sense that we do logos, they've missed the point. And we've done lots of research amongst our clients to understand their view of what's our value. And they'll say, sometimes they'll say the identity was great. Sometimes they'll say, but generally what they'll say is the real value was helping them think differently about what their business is. And to Zia's point, I think that's creativity. So there's a kind of creative take on business strategy, which then gets manifested in something like identity, but that's the outcome, not the point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I told you I'm the believer. how do you respond to certain perceptions that just like the McKinseys of the world, the consultants, you come in, tell people what to do, and then you're not there to see them go through it?
I think that I'll start, and then I'd like to go back to the example with Heathrow Express. I used to work for Pepsi, which, in fact I was there when Coke announced its change a few years back. But I worked with McKinsey, and the phenomenon that you're describing with most management consultants, I think there's a further side to it, which is that McKinsey came and asked us what the solution was, sucked a stride of data, and then told us what we already knew. But, and this is a big but, we would never have sold this in to the New York headquarters without the name on the paper. I think the big difference in terms of what we do is that we make brands real. It's not, although today we've shown PowerPoint, with Heathrow Express, we built them a train. And with Odeon Cinemas, we built them a cinema. And Zia's example there was the train.
We work very closely also more and more with management consultants, because they come in to work with the CEO to kind of come up with the business strategy. And then typically someone like Wolff, Olins, and more we're seeing this is that we work with them in a transition period, take over their work, and then translate that into a brand strategy.
And that can be something very practical. So Zia mentioned Mercedes. It's now a fast-growing business which takes some of the equity of Mercedes and stretches it into a completely new place. It's about business, money.
How would you want to react to the niggling doubt at the back of many Indian marketers that the best of brand consultancies like yourselves are back home, and therefore, well, it's global prices for Indian clients?
I think there's 2 or 3 things I'd say to that. The first is that, and it's a subject of repeated conversation with my colleagues in New York, is that we've adjusted our fees and our costs to what works in Asia. So we charge anything from 30 to 40% less than would be common in other markets. That's the first thing. The second is that initially the approach is brown eyes, blue eyes. So local understanding and a foreigner, but the local is also someone who's lived abroad. That's a temporary phase. I would imagine, and we've seen this in lots of other markets, that within 3 or 5 years, India will be entirely self-dependent in terms of brand consultancy, and our office, instead of being in Dubai, would be in India, and it will be staffed largely by Indians, and they would be selling stuff to the rest of the world. And I have to say, the first time I worked on a project in India, I was very nervous because I thought the day that the Indian advisors learn this stuff, in other words what we do, we're in trouble. Because the advertising and creative industries in India are second to none. So why aren't they exporting to Europe and America? Obviously the economy is in the toilet right now, but they could do in marketing what has already been done in the world of IT, I think. It might take a while. So I'm here temporarily. She's here for the long term.
So 2 quick questions before we come to the iPad question, because we're running short of time. We are very cost conscious in India, that you know. And in times when every dollar or every rupee counts, we also want to measure success in the short term ideally. And if you insist then in the medium, long term is, well, in the end we're all dead. So what do you think are the measures of success for consultants like yourself, more specifically in the short term, or at least medium?
I think it depends on every project. We don't treat every client as the same, but one of the things we have started doing is that in the beginning and the kickoff, we really kind of put together what is success for the client. Try to define it first, and then try to put systems in place to measure it. And I also think that we also go through a thing of what are the quick wins that we can get for this client. Because if consultants come in and then they say our process is going to take 6 months or 9 months, by then the business is changing so fast and you actually can't wait for 9 months. So we have to get in there. We have to be practical. We need to help the business, not stop the business from growing. And therefore things like success criteria, quick wins, you know, and then just working with people to kind of get them going, not stopping the business.
The flip side that I've never yet managed to do, but would love to do, and perhaps you as a client can advise how I should do it, is when the client goes to say, fine, we'll halve the fee, but you'll pay us on success. No client has yet bought that idea. So there's a kind of, I know the national sport here is not cricket, it's negotiating. But the flip side of that is rarely success-based fees. Well, it'd be good if it was. I'm happy to go to payment by results.
I'm going to jump to a question which is on many minds. We've been hearing about the digital world, and digital is the way forward, also yesterday and today. So in the world of digital, has the role of design or identity changed?
If I go back to Zia showed a gaming website. So there we said, why is your website so cluttered? And they said, we will show you why. And they diverted half of the traffic to a mirror site and stripped down the website. Now what they were also able to do was, because they had millions of hands of poker on a database, was analyze the value of every customer. And they showed that a decline in the value of customers off a clean website compared to the one that was doing this with promotions and that. That's the first thing. The second thing, and I think Zia mentioned it, is that experimentation we're now seeing being carried a stage further. So we did work with Skype last year before they were bought by Microsoft. And what they said is, help us do 3 very practical things, and then the brand can emerge from that. So they did it the opposite way around. And so that notion of experimenting works really well in the digital space. But what we're now seeing is it's spreading into some of our, as it were, real clients, and they're saying, can we try stuff? Let's change one division or one business unit, see if it works. And if it doesn't, we'll change it. Rather than the linear, big launch fanfare that we're all accustomed to. So I think it's changing a lot.
There are one too many questions that I had and which were added to me from the audience, but I think we can take that off stage. We have a minute left, and therefore the iPad winning question. I have a lot of them, so as long as I'm not lynched, chosen one, which is something which I could also experience and benefit from. A logo is created and conceptualized normally in a particular language. And in India, you know, you have one too many languages. So what do you do? How do you adapt the original logo? Do you write the name in different languages? And if so, then how does the customer link with the logo, especially in India where visual literacy is obviously higher than what they read?
So I think that the work that we've done in India so far is to kind of create global brands coming out of India. And so we've not actually come across the language where Hero hasn't changed, didn't ask us to keep changing the logo type in different languages or dialects. But we try to create brands that kind of tend to work international, taking India to the world. So we haven't come across that issue yet. Where we do come across that issue is the communication. How do you get that message, whether, like I said, to staff, employees? How do you get that in a language that people understand really quickly? When it comes to doing stuff like that, goes to Charles's point is that we don't claim to do everything. We work with a network of partners and get them to help us do it.
So I guess the next few mandates that you're going to get are going to be in and around this, because statutorily in India, outside all your retail outlets, you're supposed to put things in the local language, and very often you get stuck. You do it typographically, or you have to make changes in the logo. But anyway, that's enough for today. And since somebody wants to know who won that iPad, it's Viraja, Biswal, Law and Kenneth.
congratulations. We'll hand your iPad to you right now. Congratulations, you've won this iPad courtesy Rajasthan Patrika. Congratulations. Thank you, thank you. Zia, Charles, Mr. Kakkar, thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon. Before you leave the stage, we'd also like to present you with a memento as a token of our appreciation. I'd like to request Mr. Madhukar Kamath, past President AAAI, to join us on stage to do the honors. So, thank you.